Whenever I give an assessment, I make sure that it matches the purpose of what I'm trying to teach them. So if I'm trying to build my students' reading, I make sure that I'm assessing their reading. I'm an English as a second language teacher, so I always want to make sure that I have a purpose for what I'm assessing. So I often give writing assessments to students, and I make sure that I'm very purposeful with telling them what I'm going to mark for or for assess for in the assignment. So if we're working on sentence structure, I will tell them I'm going to give you 1 mark for using periods properly, 1 mark for capitals, 1 mark for word choice, and 1 mark for proper verb use. Or if I'm doing a writing a paragraph assignment, I'll make sure they know exactly what I'm expecting in that paragraph. So I'm very purposeful with my criteria in the assessment so that they know the purpose of what I'm teaching them. I think it really depends on the student and it depends on the situation. So if you have a really good relationship with a student and you know the student well, you know why they've been missing or why they're struggling with the assignment, you can put a little bit more pressure on them to finish as long as you know that they're capable. If you have a student who is really struggling for something and you don't quite know why and you don't know what's happening, you need to figure out the reason. Because pushing a kid too hard and pushing their capability levels too hard can lead to the student just giving up and walking away. Often, because I teach English as a second language in high school, my students are 3, 4, 5, 6 grade levels behind where they should be. Actually, even more than that. They could be 8 or 9 levels behind where they should be, grade levels. And so often, in ESL, there's a theory called I+1, and it just means that you look at what they're capable of, and then you push them just a little bit further, but not so much further that they're going to fail, but further so that they're building their growth. To me and in my school division, assessment is about what a student knows. And so if I have a question on a test or a question on an assessment, it's there for a purpose. And so it's not about marks. So no, I would never give bonus marks to students, but I also don't take late marks off. I know that some of the teachers in my divisions have started to not take late marks off, but refuse to assess things if they've handed in something like 2 weeks late, but they will assess them at the end of the semester if the student's failing. And I agree with that. Yeah. But in my situation, I have less students. So if a student hands something in at any point, I will mark it. But I will not give late marks and I will not give bonus marks because I want to know what that student knows. And an under inflated mark in a grade book doesn't tell me or their parents or another teacher what that student knows. Still assess it the exact same that I would regularly assess and whatever it was.
I see.
Because taking late marks off, you're marking behavior, and that's not necessarily effective. I always know what I want to assess when I'm giving an assignment to students, and I know the purpose of my assessment, but I definitely talk with students about what the goal of that assessment is and what a good mark means and what a bad mark means and how can you push yourself further. An example is because I work within English as an additional language student, English as a second language students, many of them have never given a presentation in a Canadian classroom, but they're often asked to give presentations in Canadian classrooms in high school and in like university studies. So I will say to them, okay, what does a good presentation look like? Let's discuss this. And we talk about volume and how well your audience can understand you, and facing the audience and eye contact and all those things that a good presentation needs, so that they understand what they need to do. So I always make sure that my students understand what the requirement is. And sometimes they'll say, Ms. Baumgartner, do we need to do this also? And I'll say, oh yes, that's actually very important. Let's continue with that. So I will definitely take their suggestions and their ideas into play. So when I differentiate assessments, I need to do it every day. I have one classroom of 12 students who are reading from a kindergarten to a grade 3 level. And I have another classroom of 19 students who are reading from a grade 2 to 5 level. So when you're really focusing on reading and writing, you have to differentiate your assessments. I often don't differentiate the actual assignment, but I'll differentiate what I expect from them. So if I'm giving a reading assignment in my lower level class, we'll read the assignment together, we'll discuss it, we'll work together. And then if they have to write to respond to the reading, I'll expect maybe a paragraph from some students, but just a couple of keywords from another. So I really more differentiate my expectations, because my students have such a varying level of capability. Just because some of them have been in the country for 1 month and some of them 2 years, it depends on their growth and where they're at.